Okay, we're gonna open up the meeting this morning. We're gonna start by saying pledge. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We got to recap of the last meeting. Before we do that, let's talk about, bylaws for these meetings. Are we gonna start keeping meeting minutes and approving the minutes of the meeting before the meeting?
Yeah, we'll have to start moving in that direction as we go forward. I really interested, are we not keeping the minutes at all?
We are, yes, sir. We just haven't approved them at any of the meetings.
Yeah, we need to put them on the agenda and approve. We just have to do it.
So let's make sure we start doing that. Approve the minutes. Okay, recap last meeting. Who wants to talk about that?
I'll do it. Recap last meeting, we had quite a few people out, Mr. Toby and Fraser and stuff. So we really didn't vote on anything. We just kind of overview of what's going on. Nothing major. In fact, recapping last meeting actually follows into my second point I'd like to go ahead to. Part of it, Mr. Bailey and I were discussing during the meeting, and I think we all agreed, Mr. Kirby agreed as well, about possibly doing a master plan for Ellisville and Fort White. That's one of the things we discussed last week. So I'd like to go ahead and, if the mayor shows up, we can get a vote possibly for that. Go ahead and go that direction and get Mr. Bailey to put one together for us, kind of give us some guidelines.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea to go ahead and get a master plan so we can kind of see which direction we want to head and where our strong points are and our weak points. Okay. So that led us right into the master plan for Fort White, Ellisville, wait for it.
Question, Robbie.
Yes, sir.
When you say put together a master plan, will that present the pros and cons, or will it just be this is the direction we want to go?
So this is mainly the growth, mainly what are our expectations in regards to growth within the area of Ellisville, within the area of Fort White, South Carolina. So that way, as a utility, we can make better decisions in regards to where we need to put infrastructure or possibly build infrastructure or put efforts into growth.
So in other words, we'll be able to break out specifics and do pros and cons on those.
So, Mr. King, a good example is down at Ellisville. We got a 25,000 gallon sewer plant today. We're expanding to a 50,000 gallon plant. During the course of expansion, we recognized before we ever got started on construction, we need to go to 75,000. So instead of, we're in the infant stages of everything, but instead of continuing that direction, piecemealing, master plan might tell us, instead of 25, 25, 25, let's go ahead and do this, right? That's an easy example, I think, of what Stacy's referred to as countywide. We want to continue piecemealing, or let's get a plan together where we think we're headed. Let's capture things more efficiently, is the way I look at it.
Well, that was why I questioned whether there'd be pros and cons, because obviously, when you started expanding, you didn't see far enough out to say, the pro side is, we can get this put in place right now. The downside was, we should have been looking at a bigger expansion.
Correct.
So, I would like to be able to question the master plan.
And I think the master plan is going to show us all your investment versus your return. I think that's the complications of this whole business, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a long-term investment for the future. I think that's why the master plan is so.
Well, and also, in the past, the county always kind of looked at the city was going to do the utilities, water, sewer, even past administration was even looking at Ellisville, probably the city taking over Ellisville.
No question.
And I think we all seen that we couldn't rely on that to happen with the city.
Right.
That's why we put a utility director on board, and I think we all agree now that the county is it's going to be in the water and sewer business, utility business.
I think we are.
On board, and we need to start preparing ourselves to be in the utility business. And a master plan is one of the things we probably needed to do for a long time, to prepare ourselves to be in that position. And hiring a utility director or something probably needed to happen.
And this committee's gotta be an active participant in that plan, because a large part of that plan is gonna be like, town of Fort White sees a need that we need to get a grocery store. Well, the reason we've never gotten one in Fort White before was we couldn't provide utility.
Right.
So you know you need it, you know where you think you want it, and that guides your spending decisions on what kind of infrastructure to put in where. So we need to have that feedback with everybody on the board of where you see growth growing and what those needs of that growth are, because that's then going to guide how the system expands.
So,
Go ahead, Mr. Baker.
I guess to kind of address some of the concerns, it's not going to be done in a vacuum. This committee is a very integral part of that process when you start doing that. But the master plan is going to give us it's going to give us a roadmap to the future, to which direction we're going. You know, the committee will have to identify, where the service areas are, where the needs are, and we develop kind of a phased plan that allows us to then implement that into the county's capital improvements plan. That helps us then to identify future financing options, whether it be grants, loans, or whatever the case may be. And then it makes you eligible for some of those programs because we've got it laid out and what our phases will be. It's not an absolute in that I can't deviate from it. It is a plan. A plan sometimes change. You adopt and you modify as you need to, but it gives you a general direction you want to go. So everybody needs to understand that, there's going to be a lot of input into that, and then we develop that, and then, when we come to the end, everybody's got to agree this is what we want to go, the direction we want to go.
So, with that being said, thank you, Mr. Bailey. Can we go ahead and request a vote on doing a master plan for Fort White and Ellisville?
We have that vote here, yeah. Okay, you want to make a motion to approve, would we send out an RFQ, or would we just hire ready to do it, or how would that work? I mean, he's working on our engineering now for the town, and guess what? I think the motion would be to hire North Park Professional Services while they're doing the engineering for the water line and the sewer utility to do a master plan study for utilities. Yes, sir. Can I get a motion for that? Second. Got a motion and a second. Joe, can I make a motion as the chair on this board? Yes, sir. I want to clarify that. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, so we can proceed with that.
Thank y'all. On to number 3, part of what I've identified over the last 2.5 months of working is to grow and to have certified personnel. We need to go ahead and start a training program, and part of that, Mr. Kirby, Mr. Dave, and myself, we've got a new personnel put in for October. Hopefully we can hire someone and go ahead, instead of having 2 personnel for 2 plants, we'll have a third that can start helping operate whenever one takes vacation and one goes on sick or whatever the case may be. So we're not at a single point of failure anymore as far as from a personnel standpoint.
So your request is for an additional operator, personnel for an operator, or what is it?
Yeah, board level. Yes, sir, no, sir, but that's my request, just letting everybody know that I put in a request to Mr. David and Mr. Jackson. Yep.
And you just need 1 or 2, or how many just 1?
Right now, I think 1, and then until we get a good encapsulation, we can we can put out some RFQs for contractors. We've talked to a couple of different contractors in regards to maintenance and operations and stuff such as that. We currently use Twofold. They have a contract for White and also Ellisville wastewater facility. So we can utilize some other avenues instead of hiring so many personnel right now.
And Mr. Ford, what Stacy's saying, Dave and Stacy and I, we met with a company that represents multiple counties. Where they out of?
They're actually out of Ocala. Well, Ocala, they have an office and they have another one in, right outside of Dawson.
Long story short, we're in the immediate future planning of going out for services. And what our ideas was to kind of capture, as you indicated, a new business. What does it cost to run this? And they're one of many, but they provide service for other counties. They're a one-stop shop as far as, but it's middle of the night, middle of the day, Saturdays or Sundays. So what our goal was, as with any new business, let's hire somebody. We've got our immediate in-house personnel doing day-to-day functions. What equipment, what personnel, we're gonna try to track that in detail, whatever all that is. Then you assume a profit margin at some point down the road, we can decide, okay, let's do all this in-house performance, or it's simply better to contract it out. We don't know that yet. But if they do it all, and you do proper management on the tracking side, it positions you 3-5 years from now, we don't need to hire this out anymore. Let's go hire more folks, let's get in the heavy equipment business, because right now, the bottom line is, you simply shore the utility business up for public workers. Okay, that's the bottom line. The utility business, as it stands today, pickups they drive, the fuel they burn, we're just starting to really capture it properly. Okay, but the reality is when one line breaks or anything happens, Stacy has to reach out to public works does everything. The goal is, let's find what this really costs to O&M, operate, maintain on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, right? Track it, then it's a conscious decision made at this level to say, let's quit farming this out, or that's the smartest thing in the world. And it also captures your overhead with any business, right? Here, right now, we've not been doing that. We say we got revenue, say we got expenses, that's not true. We're blending the two. That stopped immediately. We're now capturing true costs.
The other thing is, you started as a water plant and a sewer plant now. Now we've added Fort White with another water plant, sewer plant. If you're adding the NFMIP, now you're talking about 3 water plants, 3 sewer plants. As it grows, it's becoming more and more complicated. And 2 guys in a pickup truck can do it.
And what Dave was referring to, obviously you got 4 or 5 other small utilities. When this all started, we got, when I say we, staff got called out once every 6 months for a problem. That's no longer the case. It's on a weekly basis at them now. So the blending of the two just is not reasonable at some point.
Yeah, and if we go ahead and do a little, be proactive and get a person trained up and get their Class C water and wastewater license. That way, by the time things start rolling around, we start, putting water and wastewater into something, at least now we have personnel that are trained and able to hit the ground running instead of being reactive.
And we've had to pick up small systems like Mason City and Plantation Park. And Plantation Park, we turned over to the city. We still operate Mason City. We have a receivership on Lance Utilities. So, I mean, we get these little utilities scattered around the county because private companies are just getting out of the business. Now, there's one private company that's buying up a lot of these. By the way, Hespenship just sold on Woodgate Terrace. But it's more than just 2 guys in a pickup truck right now.
But from this board's perspective, I relate it to our red light business, right, our traffic ops. For many, many years, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars farming that out. We got fortunate a few years ago. We went into traffic ops on our side of things. Way smaller costs, much efficient. We've got control over it. I view the utility business just like that.
Okay. So somebody want to make a motion that we, approve the hiring of 1 new personnel for the utility?
You would be recommending it to the county commission.
Recommend it to the county commissioner, okay, you'll recommend it to the county commissioner. That would, the motion recommended.
I think you just made it.
Can I get a second on it? Got a motion and a second, any more discussion on this?
No, sir.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let's get that to go to the board. not Thursday, but the next meeting, I guess.
To be here, buddy.
Port White water meters. Water management, I've been told that we received a grant, possibly, or going to get a grant to pay for the water meters.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Fill us in on that.
Me and Mr. David met with, Mr. Alexander from the Swanee River Water Management District, and, after looking at the plan and what we were trying to accomplish with the upgrade, he thought it would be a good venture to go in with. So, he agreed to, and I guess next week, me and Mr. Kirby and David will go to the district office and receive the money and put new, meters in.
I encourage some of these board members to show up too. Let's show our gratitude to the Corner Water Management District for the grant money.
With that being said, now I'm gonna put out and get new quotes, because after talking to some of the other smaller counties and other personnel, there's some better options for us that come with 15 and 20-year warranties versus the ones we have. So we might want to look at different avenues. So I'll be getting some of those and present to the board in the next little while.
Yeah, that was, we had talked about that on our board, and that was not a cheap venture for us to do, so we greatly appreciate that.
Also, portion B, a new contact tank in Fort White. I submitted it to Mr. Kirby for budgeting for capital. Hopefully it'll, depend on funding obviously, but that's one of the things we've also tried to look at, replace that contact tank that, they said we needed to either repair or replace. So.
Now the contact tank, which one is that on that plan? Is that the,
That's the big tank.
the pressurized tank?
Yes, sir.
They do want that.
Hydropneumatic.
The hydromatic tank, yes, sir.
And that tank is the original tank that was put in the water system to build, right?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Oh, okay.
And then, C is, actually, Mr. Terry can probably, he can talk more about this, but I think, he put in for the grant for phase 2 and phase 3 of the wastewater treatment facility in Fort White. Mr. Terry?
Yeah, what you got, Ron, is you got storage, you got a ground storage tank, and then you got a pressure tank.
The one that looks sort of like a gas tank.
Hydromatic tank.
Yes, sir.
That's the one you gotta replace, because it's corroding.
This one we clean?
Yes.
Try to inspect that we got.
That is, and it was corroding at the seams.
Yes, sir.
With the well seams.
Okay.
Yes, we submitted, in fact, we submitted one for phase 2 and one for phase 3 under wastewater protection grants. And the wastewater protection grant program is the program last year, Fort White got 5.4 in. So we submitted for 2 additional phases. We've broken it down last year in the 2 phases that were total around $9.2 million. Since DP had already seen that, I didn't want to change my phasing numbers, so I just went ahead and submitted for phase 2 and phase 3. The input that we've gotten from various people is that the money's in the program, and so hopefully we'll see both phases approved. That would enable us to go in and pretty much, Rick and I were talking, and pretty much enable us to go in and reach most of the residential customers and complete. That there could be some left, but it would do most of it with residential.
Most of it.
And that's in the city, in the city of.
That's in the city limits.
Town
Yeah.
limits.
First three phases in the town limits were that were the first 3 phases. And so first phase we're putting in includes, of course, the plant, the spray field, and then the commercial. And then these 2 reach out into residential and finalize the commercial areas.
Good deal. All right. So, let's talk about Ellisville.
Yes, sir. I'm going to get with Mr. Terry, and we're going to look at putting an interconnect between the east and west side in Ellisville. so we don't have a single point of failure, because right now, the way that it's ran, you have one side on one train, one side on the other, and there's no connection. This will help us if we can get a grant. I'm gonna give it to Mr. Stahls. If we can get a grant to do this, we will blow down less, which is less wastewater or wasting of water. And it also gives us backfeed for each side of Ellisville, instead of having to shut down if we have a break on one or the other area. We can keep it operating functional.
So basically, you compete it from either region.
Yes, sir.
Very good. So, do we need to take any action as far as approving, to apply for a grant or anything?
You can authorize us to apply for it. It's a water management district grant.
I think you have our authorization to apply for any grant. We did.
Like you could. Like your vote right there.
You will even vote on that, I mean, just go ahead, you have our.
As far as number 2 well is concerned, ground repair, here about 3 weeks ago, we had a cave-in right beside one of our well casings. And we've got, thank you to Mr. Kirby for allowing me to use Mr. Ron, Public Works, his crew. We utilized DEP suggestions, Rural Water Association suggestions, and the pictures that are attached, you'll see that from the time it was a rather large cavity. It's fixed, repaired, the pump has been sanitized, tested, and back in service, so we're back to full capacity.
What is the process to seal that cavity off? Do you some kind of, like, drill mud down there?
There is rock, there is some flowable concrete, there's some 57 stone, and then there's clay. So, and that was from Fred Handy at Rural Water Association. That was his suggestion. In fact, he was so impressed, we took pictures statewide, and he actually kept them for future reference, because he's only seen it once in 15 years. So.
Yeah, I know that area down there.
Sir?
You have a deal what cost it?
We're thinking the flushing of the pump. You have to flush your pumps periodically for whether it's triangle or vacuums and all that. But the flushing point is a 4-inch flush line that runs out and it hits the ground right where that started. So the thought process is it was washing away on the ground, erosion. Now, we went ahead, put a valve assembly there, ran it out further where this would not be an issue if that was the root cause. Definitively, measure, I don't know if that was the root cause.
I'm glad we got, maybe it hold up.
Could you tell how deep it was?
Estimationally, I'd say 18 feet.
Was it lime rock in that area?
No, sir. No, sir, it was clay.
I was gonna say, I put it clay on there. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, yeah. Okay, Mason City.
Another grant that we've already blanket voted. Hopefully we can put a Mason City water line in. We're gonna get the estimations and turn it into Stahls to see if we can't get a grant around water to Mason City. Get those 2 irrigation wells that we took over in October of 2014 that are currently running on, try to remove them from service to have good water in Mason City.
Now, will you be running sewer in Mason City also, or is that?
Well, we are actually working on it. I wanted to go ahead and put that in as a grant as well. This first phase would be to Mason City, water line and wastewater, and the second phase would be all the way up to roughly Nettles. If the grant, depending upon.
Would you run it always Nettles, the Nettles Hall?
We would try if we got grants approved. Yes, sir.
I know that would,
So right now, the Linville Dix used to own a water system in Mason City. For those houses that are behind the community center, it's just run off 2 small wells. He forfeited his, abandoned his system, it came to our, so we've been running Mason City ever since. It would allow us, like you said, run a water line up the highway to Mason City. And eventually you could extend it all the way up to the interchange with Nettles.
Yes, sir.
I know I've had some discussion with, Mr. Nettles about that in the past, that was, he's got a tough situation there with his the process he does with checking systems, basically. That would benefit him a lot.
I will say this. As the sewer utility grows in Ellisville, you will reach a point where you outgrow your package treatment plants and have to put in a real sewer plant.
And Stacy and I were talking about that. We're going to discuss that as part of this. This is another wastewater protection grant that he and I talked about. And it basically make a determination as to how much additional utilization that you're gonna have. I mean, more gallons per day. And then include that level of treatment as far as adding more treatment trains out there with your, because you can add them 25,000 gallons a piece till you get up to about 300, 350. And add those in as part of this grant. So
that's why we need the national
So
plan.
what would be your gallons per day before you have to get to that point, you think? What would that number be? Greater.
you're permitted for 50 right now. And so it's supposed to be at 75% capacity of that 50.
No, I mean, so we need to switch that from a package plan out to.
Oh,
Isn't that 700,000?
in talking to, and you got a Mac there, in talking to Kirk Roncone, who handles Mac, he and I talked before about it, and he said, and it's just what I told you, he said you can take it with treatment trains up to about 300, 350. He said, then what they've got, he said, is they've got one that's about 350, 400,000 gallons that's set in place by itself, but you can still hook it into what you've got as far as in the package plant, and you could take it up to about 700,000 gallons per day. Once you get too far past that, he said, then you're looking at, it's something that you need to design and build in place. That's
Freestanding facility.
freestanding facility.
It's not something.
When you're getting that large, are we gonna have to shift from roads to spray fields or some other?
Well, David, it's,
Because
I mean,
there's limitation of land right now as well.
right, yeah, it's, the question's gonna be out there once we look toward the west, for instance, there at Fort White, and the same thing there at Ellisville, is from a limitation of land standpoint, that your depth to your groundwater is going to dictate that, because it's, I mean, let's say if you had, for instance, let's say you have around a little over 1 million gallons per day. If depth to groundwater is 5 feet, you're talking around 100 acres for ribs. If your depth to ground, if it's 20 feet, if the depth of groundwater for 1 million is 5 feet, then you're talking 850 acres at that same location. So the question is what's your depth of groundwater? I mean, is your depth of groundwater 20 feet and it's relatively sandy soil, or at least sandy loam, then okay, you're in pretty good shape with ribs. If it's not, then you're probably gonna have to look at spray field, or, in order for you to be able to capture all of that. Now, you don't necessarily, I mean, you can also look at wetland treatment, turn to wetland park. I mean, there are options, but,
What I'm saying is, at some point, you're gonna have to acquire land.
that's right.
Yes.
No matter what you do. Yeah, excuse me, that's
I mean, we
absolutely,
have 88 acres, but really usable for the
absolutely,
wastewater side.
yes, absolutely. 88 acres would go like that.
The master plan and the acreage, I think, is going to dictate a lot.
Yeah, I think y'all need to include that in the master plan for the future.
Oh, it covers all of that.
Yeah, because I really believe that area is probably going to start developing pretty quick.
The city of Fort White still has the 100 acres off Memorial River Road that to be used. I mean, I think the mayor would agree with me. Now that we're in the business with the county, Fort White's never gonna need it for anything unless it's with the county. I mean, as far as utilities, water or sewer. So, I mean, we definitely, I've said it once already, you know, if we don't utilize it, I'm sure Swanee River gonna want it back at some point, you know, if we don't have these.
I think it ought to be reasonable, in the future we'll need it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's what I said, you know, that one day eventually,
Is that 100 acres, 150?
I believe it's only 100 acres. Yeah. But still, I mean, that's 100 acres that we don't have to purchase. I mean, that's sitting there.
I think we should approach Swan River Waterman and just let them know that we would like to acquire that property as utility for future use.
Yeah.
Because I know whenever they give it to Fort White, if they didn't use it, it kind of, interpretation was that they didn't use it for water wells or water system, they were to return it back to the water bank moving forward.
We can capture that at our meeting next week.
Yeah, yes, sir.
That's something,
That's a good point, Dave.
I mean, that's something you should, I mean, we can't utilize it unless it's for water or sewage, so I don't. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Discuss it, probably.
Yeah.
Just want to back up to Mr. Nettles. If we get sewer up there, we will need to check that effluent on his, because it will be, or it could be fairly strong, and there may have to be some pre-treatment before he actually puts it in our system.
Yeah.
Or otherwise it'll recapture.
He has several grease traps in place, but it's still pretty strong waste, I think. Yeah.
Well, just, you know, some uses, you just gotta make sure that there's, it's coming to us at something that we can handle without it causing us problems.
Right.
And we just evaluate, we can, I mean, it can be addressed, it just needs to be part of the equation. So,
Yeah.
And now that we've got this committee and all, I'm starting to have employees for this, just so we don't wind up like Gainesville, the situation they got into with the grease. The people weren't making some of their grease traps. And I know Ellisville is a small scale right now, very small scale, but it's something we need to go ahead and address with Love's, Burger King, Wendy's, everywhere that's got a grease trap. We probably need to start, you know, getting them on some type of 6-month program to where the county's making sure we're pumping these things. You know, because that grease will tear, I mean, it'll.
You know, that was part of our, we voted on.
We had a show cause order from DEP, and we amended the county's code of ordinances to address exact those issues. And it's because of Ellisville and an issue.
But Stacey, we need to start making sure we make sure they're doing it. We need to get some kind of reporting system. Probably like Luttrell County. They have a lot of. No, I'm just saying that it's very important you get this grease from.
They've got 2 or 3 guys that all they do is ride around and inspect grease traps, and if they do not have, if they're not up to their standard, they shut that restaurant down right then and there. They have that authority.
Yeah. But I mean, we're not at that point yet, I don't.
We actually have, we sent out all the businesses that sign, we have that, and then we have a checklist by guys. Robert, Dominique, he handles Ellisville for me, and so he goes around, and I would hypothetically venture to say about every 3 or 4 months, he'll make just a loop, because he went through this before at other facilities, so he's kind of very adamant about checking, and he gets his checklist, and he turns it in, and it's actually on SharePoint for the county website.
Good deal. Yeah, I mean, as everybody's very well, we're not Luttrell County, we don't want to be Luttrell County by any means, but if we're gonna be a utility, that's something that's very important to utility.
That's the whole.
David and I both are into the business, so we kind of understand a lot more than others do, but I mean,
We deal directly with GRU about that. Once they figure out that we're the contractor doing that work, they'll just contact us directly and say, if you don't get out there today, we're shutting them down.
I mean, and they'll make us provide a log of what, you know, of the pumping record.
They'll have me, I have to send a receipt from my dumping facility. I have to send them an actual written receipt for that, so. They're adamant that you're gonna pump your grease trap in Washington County.
Well,
But it's-
unfortunately, they got bad actors in all areas, and somebody says they did it, they didn't do it.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, it's a cost to the business, I mean, no doubt about it, they're going, they're trying to make a living, and make money too, but I mean, it's.
Celebration Point, there's a sushi place that they're about every 2 months. And it's almost, I mean, it's right out of $1,000 a pump, that lease trap. So, I mean, it's actually pretty good.
Let's talk about the North Florida Mega Industrial Park. What's going on with the well place? Where are we at on that?
Well, where we left it, the last time we discussed it was that y'all were gonna set up a, workshop. And that we were gonna address it within that workshop. So at this point in time, we made the determination what location we want it to be, I think, which is that north location close to the Baker County line, one closest to Highway 90. But we're just at this point waiting for someone to tell us really what to do. Should we go forward as far as installing it, or are there other steps to take with the Board of County? That's where we're at.
Stacy?
Well,
There was a meeting held out here, there was a meeting held between county staff and city staff. There were options put on the table. The city, according to that meeting, I think it was Commissioner Riley. They are willing to offer services in relation to water, on a contractual basis. And I think Terry hit the nail on the head. I think the goal was to have a workshop at a Board of County Commissioner meeting to discuss options as it relates. But, the city, according to that meeting, is willing to provide water, in 5 words, sell us back our water.
They'll hang you out to dry in the end of it.
Myself, look here. And I've talked with Kevin about this, we talked about it, at the meeting. And my thing is, look, if it was just to provide water for the main industrial park, maybe I wouldn't mind going that route. But, the bottom line is, we're going into utility business. We're gonna need wells. We're gonna need our own water. We need to be in control of our own water. And we're not just looking at providing water to the main industrial park. I'm looking at providing water to the east side of Columbia County. And maybe, tying that facility into Ellisville one day and, people, new managers come on with the city, new council members, and, I don't think we have the stability we need right now with the city to hang our hat on that kind of agreement for I don't know how long in the future, you know what I'm saying? I think we need to proceed on the way we started out and find a suitable location for a well. And let's provide our own water. That's how I feel about it.
I agree with Commissioner Ford. There's some things that are gonna come out about this. There's some things that I didn't know was out there in the public that are actually gonna be disclosed to the public about this. Probably this afternoon when our latest candidate forum hits, because my opponent actually disclosed it. So it's no longer a secret about the well situation at the mega industrial park. But I also, and maybe I'm the only one who remembers this, but I do remember when these discussions came up in a Board of County Commissioner workshop or meeting, there was somebody, I believe from Swanee River Water Management, who stood up and said, this isn't just legally sign papers and do it. There are legal loopholes to this about having your cup used by the city. And the whole reason we went this route is because they didn't have capacity, and now we have capacity. So I don't think it's a flip a light switch and let them pump water to us situation either. And if we can do it on our own, I think that's the cleanest and easiest way to go.
Mr. Chair, I would strongly, and Mr. Witt, you're exactly right. It's out there. And that's why Dave and I have talked, we feel a public workshop, we don't want to be accused of not planning, duplication of services. I think it's important, we think it's important that we do a public workshop where everybody's educated on the rumor mill, right? So if you talk to the right people, we're insane, I'll just say it. We're going and drilling a well 4 or 5 miles away and run pipes, et cetera. And if you know the whole story, it's not insane. But nobody, I think outside of this room and a few others, understands the whole story. Does that make sense? So it's a business model. If the right person hears, Lord have mercy, we got wells a quarter mile away from your problem, all you gotta do is take this permit and put it over here, we'll say, X amount of gallons for $1.38 or whatever the math was. It sounds like a terrific deal on the table, but then when you know everything else going on, it's not. And that's why we think it's very important that we have public there, the press there, for everybody to pick up so rumor mills are not started. Because that's what you're gonna hear if you don't really know.
I agree, but here's the thing. And I just go and say, I was sitting in the utility meeting with the city, but one of the council members basically stated, if we didn't give them all the water, they wouldn't give us any water. I mean, you know, how do you, it's just, we're trying to work a deal with them providing the residential water and us providing the non-potable, and they basically, his statement was exactly, we get it all or you don't get nothing. So, I mean, David, you was in that meeting, and, I'm just saying, I don't know. It's too unstable of a situation for me to put this important matter into their hands.
But I think that's kind of what Kevin was getting at, is why we need to go ahead and just get it
Right.
all on the table in a public forum, so that everybody knows exactly what's going on.
Some people.
I agree, I mean,
And the fact it's not as easy as what they're saying. It's not as easy, let's just turn on the spigot and you buy our water.
Right.
There's legal stuff to jump through.
And
That
David
you may
and
or may not get through.
David and I had a lengthy conversation. How good is that commitment? Based on just recent things I read in the paper last day or two, it's very obvious things can be renegotiated quickly. So that was our concern of how strong the commitment is, irregardless of what the commitment is. But we think it's just extremely important, based on feedback we hear from this one and that one, that the public understands that the county's not a bunch of outlaws or renegades just going out there doing their own thing because we want to. Here's why we're doing it. That's my recommendation.
you know, I'll make it clear for the last 4 years, if the city wants to be a partner with the county, we'll be a partner. But it can't just be on their terms as a partnership. And that's how they want to do it. What's good for, they want to push what's good for them, but anything that benefits us, they don't want anything to do with it. So, and a partnership's got to be good for both sides. I mean, that's the definition of partnership.
So I guess, is this committee comfortable with the public workshop, putting all the cards on the table?
I'm good with it. I mean, I want to be as transparent with the public as I can be. I've always have been, always will be. And I'll state my reasons why I feel the way I feel. I have no problem with
Have we had discussions with Weyerhaeuser about a new site?
Yes.
And they're willing to go that route?
They're fine.
They can help us pick the locations, because it's their problem.
Yes.
We're good.
Commissioner, it comes down to cost. That's where it comes down to cost and educate the public.
Well, I mean, I know a few weeks ago, we weren't there yet. We are, maybe when we had our meeting with Weyerhaeuser, we weren't there yet, so I was wondering if y'all had cleaned that
it.
up.
Have we explored this? Put the work system on the 50 acres that the county owns? I mean, I know that's further west. Is that not an option, or is that not just not a good option, or?
Yes, it's available, but it's gonna be more cost. It's a long way we got to run pipe back to the industrial park.
Further than going all the way to the county line? Okay, I actually put that on a map. Okay,
And the point is, going to the county line, you're going up gradient of where the problem is.
okay.
That's the reason we tried to stay for cost purposes. The 2 wells that failed, that's why we started there. We didn't want to go further.
Right, and it's not quite, and it's not quite all the way to the county line. It's close. But it's
It's not on.
It's second look, it's even lands, it's like-
Okay, but I'll make a motion, let's have a meeting on it, let's have a workshop on it. So we can go ahead and lay it out.
They just indicated who's going to request the Board of County Commissioners at tomorrow, we need to set a date.
Okay.
And this committee is comfortable recommending that? Do you want to take a vote to recommend it to the board?
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Keep looking confused. Glad you made the motion.
Tom
I made a
seconded.
motion.
It was a long motion, but I got it.
All right. So, we got one other topic. Stas, you want to start us out? We're going to talk a little bit about forming, what's actually involved in forming a utility.
Yeah, I know this idea has been kicked around a few times and, Mr. Foreman and I researched the topic a little bit and we saw what other counties are doing with utility authorities. Some of them are, most of them are created by an independent special district by the legislature. Okeechobee County has one that's, it has been an interlocal agreement with the city of Okeechobee and Okeechobee County since 1999. So obviously this is just in the preliminary stages, but for an actual utility authority, that would be an independent authority created by the legislature, a local bill would have to occur. Representative Brandon would be the sponsor if he's willing. And this would go through the legislative process. It would be voted on by the legislative delegation, then eventually signed by the governor. And this would create an independent utility authority for Columbia County. So this is a route that people we want to move forward with. This is something that can be potentially attainable. Or if anybody else has any ideas, that would be great. But this is something we've been talking about back and forth and putting some preliminaries together.
Stas, let's talk a little bit about what, if you form an independent utility, what would that enable them to be able to do as far as,
What their responsibility?
The responsibility and their ability to raise money, apply for grants. Basically, I had a discussion with Sasha this morning. They will be able to do bonding for
Right.
projects. They would be able to, go ahead.
Yeah, so they would be able to apply for grants and appropriations. They would have their own governing board. That composition could be made up in several ways. We just hadn't decided about what best direction that would be composed of. And really, they would set utility rates and manage, operate, and promote the utilities system.
They would not be able to levy a tax.
No, that would not be in an implemented language.
Basically, the only funds they would be able to do with bonding or grants
And rate.
and set rates for the utility. I guess I talked to Carl, he was concerned about what the abilities of a utility would be. I know I had no idea, but, you know.
Yeah, and that's something that definitely can be written into the bill, based on what the entity that sponsors the bill would like. So we could, there's broad definitions of what we could actually create the utility authority to be, but it has to be written into the implemented bill.
And the board could be kind of made up of how we determine, but now you did tell me that you thought the governor might have to appoint one member of the board.
Usually that's how it is with independent districts. But again, it could be, the board composition could be written up, we would like it.
And, now let's talk about what, just the interlocal agreement, like, I believe it's, Okeechobee County. has.
Yeah, so they created, they combined all their utility assets into an interlocal agreement from, between the city of Okeechobee and Okeechobee County back in 1999. And it's been stable ever since, and that interlocal agreement created the Okeechobee Utility Authority. So that was something that was done locally, done by the people there, and it's been operating ever since as its own entity. Other counties that I've looked at was Clay and Escambia, the Emerald Coast Utility Authorities and the Clay County Utility Authorities. They were both created by the legislature. And I think the reason why they went with the legislature is that it gave more stability and more teeth into what those entities could do.
So basically, an interlocal agreement, way me and you look at it is, the only drawback to that, if one of them wanted to pull out at some point, they could pull out.
That's a potential, that's a possibility, yes.
But there, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes with that too. Who carries the debt when they pull out or whatever, so, being starts with that, actually forming a utility through the legislature would actually give it a more binding effect, I guess, for the future. But like he said, Okeechobee has worked well since 1999, but we all know boards change, people change, and, you know, I think the more stable we could make it would probably be the best for the future of the county and the city. That's kind of what
I agree.
But that's something we need to think about, and, any questions y'all have, y'all can get with Tosh.
So,
We're gonna probably need to be making some kind of a decision on this, you know.
if you're going to do a legislative bill, that means you've got to get it ready prior to January. So that you can start meeting with your legislative delegation.
Scott, you're saying that at any given time that, well, I mean, and I think
Or that local agreement.
you could just separate, you could say, all right, we're done, we don't like the way this is going, we're out.
So in a local agreement, if it's a contract, there's always a provision in every contract that if you separate, what's gonna happen.
Well, I think Rocky hit the word on the head when he said stability. I mean, 'cause everybody that's on this board here now, even with the council in Fort White and all the county commissioners, so we in 8 years, we might not, none of us be here.
Right.
So setting this thing up long-term to make sure the word stability, that it is stable, that somebody can't come in here, like the next mayor from Fort White, and say, I'm done with Lake City. And change the whole format that we've all worked hard to put together. I think that would be a very tiered, we need to figure out a way that we can stabilize stability.
Well, financial responsibility goes with that too.
Well, right.
But I feel, I mean, what's your thought?
I think he's right. I think most of what you're doing here, you know, a lot of these projects are long-term, you know, 10,
Yes.
20-year projects that are going to outlive all of us on these boards, and maybe going to outlive all of us on these boards, I should say.
Right.
And, so, you know, to cement this where, you know, it sets it up to be in place without being ordered, to me, is and legislative action is better.
And one of the great things about it is, and I've said it in the past, you can create a board for this utility that's a non-elected board, so they're not basing their decisions on getting reelected or whatever.
Right.
They're basing their decisions on what's best for the county, the town, and what's best for the utility, you know? So, I mean, let's face it, sometimes in a utility, you have to make some unpopular decisions. I mean, it's, y'all are well aware of that when we're dealing with water and what, I mean, it's just,
We'll let him do it.
but I mean, something's gotta be done, at the same time, something's gotta be done, if you want to make it off the
But at the same time, you can write bylaws to this organization without going through the legislative process that would be binding in the long term, just like any other organization. I mean, how many, districts are they in Florida now? Of this type?
Don't have a specific number, but I can get back to you.
It's not in the teens, is it? The last I looked into it, there was like 13, and that included Reedy Creek, which has now been dissolved. So what is the downside to being involved? I know once you get tied in with more government, there's more strings that nobody ever says up front. There's always a string down here that I would have to know a lot more than what you just said to convince me to go with that myself. That's my opinion. And yes, sir, I don't mind taking the heat.
Yeah, but, and that's what I'm saying, I think we need to do a little research into that, get a little more information, because I just still did on all this myself, so I'm having, trying to digest it all myself, so.
There's a reason why Governor DeSantis has made a statement that he was opposed to forming any more, because of the fact that they're not elected, they can pretty much do as they see fit to, and just like you said.
So
elected
but they still will be appointed by, those people will be appointed, most of them will be appointed by the elected official. So if they can't just, they would have to, if they got two out of line, you can remove them off the board. Am I correct?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, what Stash and Joel were talking about yesterday is, there's a lot of different ways you can do it.
Exactly.
You can have some elected, you can have some appointed, you can have different, those are the decisions you gotta make. Prepare to go down that track, is that correct?
Yes. And like, so Escambia County, all of their utility commissioners are elected by the people in Escambia County. They have one person per county commission district that are strictly run for the utility commission. And so, like in Clay, all of them are appointed by the governor. So there's different ways of doing it. I know in Okeechobee with the interlocal agreement that there's some from the county, some from the city.
And also keep in mind, the governor would have to approve this. So I mean, if this gets passed, this is a bill, it's a legislative act. So the governor would himself approve this ultimately, if there's any concerns there. I think what distinguishes the utility special district from something like Reedy Creek is this is not really a full-blown governmental entity like Reedy Creek is. Reedy Creek did everything, within its territorial jurisdiction. This is more like an enterprise. You need to think about this the way we think about a landfill. Money in, services rendered, expenses paid, everything's compartmentalized, and the decisions that are made are in the best interest of that enterprise to keep it healthy and growing so the services can be rendered. Versus a Reedy Creek, which is really about streamlining a lot of bureaucracy for those people, and that did cause an erosion of accountability.
And you have other ones in the state too, you have the villages, you have
Yeah.
Longwood Ranch, several private cities.
And that's not what this would be. This is more of an enterprise.
Those are development districts.
Right.
This
is
is
very different.
something different.
And I think that's the reason why there's a limited number of them, because a lot of them are private. Operate inside of a city or a county.
As for the board that you're talking about us appointing, would they be a just a recommendation board? It's gonna recommend.
They will have.
That's why it's called.
They will have authority.
Yeah, they will have their own money, they will spend. their own money.
But we have a say in how we set that.
Right.
I mean, it could be some of the levels. All right, from what I can understand, we should basically kind of set it up like we have now. But and I don't have a problem making decisions. I mean, I make decisions, we make them all the time on the board of county commission, y'all do too. And basically, I state my reason why I voted like I did, and. that's kind of how I do it, but I mean, you know, I justify my vote, you know.
So the bottom line is that if the wishes are to separate utilities, to get all the assets under one roof, to get the county utility assets, town of Fort White's utility assets under one entity, this would be that enterprise entity that would operate utilities, set rates, get grants for capital improvements, hire folks, et cetera.
And to Carl's point, we can still make up the bylaws of this utility, how we wanna make, we can make the bylaws kind of like we wanna do it, am I correct?
Well, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're trying to build and go before the legislature.
Right.
Bill.
So, Mr. Chair, what Stosh and I would really like to have, going forward, we're gonna get into a position here in the next month or so, where we're gonna start having meetings with Representative Brandon's office. We'd like to have a member of this committee appointed as our liaison to attend those meetings with us. Not to be presumptuous, but I'd actually like to be you if you're okay with it. Because these are exactly the kind of details we want to hash out with Representative Brandon. Understand, he's got a sponsored bill. So at the end of the day, he's got to like what we're doing too. So we have to have those meetings, we have to educate him, explain to him why we want to do it. We also are going to need to come back to the town and to the county and get legislative endorsement from those two agencies to say, hey, we really want this, because Representative Brandon's not going to carry water for us if either side of this deal falls through on him. It's very embarrassing that we'll do that. So there's a lot of groundwork we got to do in the next 4 or 5 months. So we might have one member of this committee appointed to work with Stosh and I to coordinate with representatives.
Board's okay with that, I'd be glad to do that, and like I say, anybody wants to sit in on those meetings, it'd be fine to sit in.
I would add that y'all said y'all were gonna look, because once again, from an SRS standpoint, there's a difference between water and wastewater and the way it's dealt with. One of them's dealt with from a county standpoint, and one of them's dealt with from a service area standpoint. So therefore, for instance, on the wastewater right now, as we look at SRF to try to bring in the rest of the funding, what you end up with is you end up with the opportunity for principal forgiveness. Under the county, because of population, every 10,000, that can't be. And so there are some advantages and disadvantages there that y'all mentioned that you're going to look at to try to incorporate. I just want to bring that up again so it's in front of your minds.
Yeah, and that's the nature, because this is a special bill, because this is legislation coming from the full legislature, we can actually work on writing the bill to account for that. Right, so we're asking the Florida legislature to give us permission, hey, when we create this entity, can we retain our ability to apply for things on behalf of the town of Fort White? Can we retain our ability to apply for things based on certain geographical restrictions or poverty levels, things like that? We can ask the legislature to give us that, right? We have a lot of power here. And again, that's all the things that need to be talked through. Stosh work does, it's like 19 pages, but we have already, right? So that's not just empty language, there's 19 pages of substantive stuff.
Great.
Back to the appointees. I would recommend that you keep as much local control as you can on that. Maybe the governor has to have one, but my experience with the governor's office on other entities that we deal with, they become low on the totem pole because he's got so many other important things he has to deal with. A lot of times if somebody leaves for whatever reason, and then you don't have a quorum on the board, then you can't act. And the governor has not been in a hurry to appoint those people to replace them. I've had a board that goes months and almost a year without being able to take any action. So at a local level, you can have a lot more control over that.
And I agree with you 100%. We definitely want to keep it as local level as we can. Hopefully some of the same people we have on here, most of the same people we have on here now. Please.
I would like to, I guess, go ahead and make a motion that we table this because we're just getting started into this. I don't really know what we've got. And I think before we go and bring in the legislation make a bid, you know, to get Representative Brandon to endorse this. We really don't know what we're doing. And once again, I've not heard enough. I know we talked about it a couple of weeks ago and it will jeopardize our funding. Well, now, once we do an authority, where's that seed money coming from to finance this?
So that would have to be, and like I say, we're not voting on anything today anyway. This is all just a discussion. It's not even on the agenda. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just bringing this. to your attention.
Like I say, I'd like
This is
to
strictly
come
a
back.
discussion item today. So.
What if you're gonna start talking with Representative Brandon's office, and start laying this out?
Well,
That's something, isn't it?
we're just talking about the process, basically, like what the process would be. But, we'll have to decide what direction we're going as far as,
Like I say, I've got a motion on the floor to table this until we get more information. It can die without a second, or that's my opinion.
wait a second. Motion died from lack of a second. But anyway, I think, like I was saying earlier, this is just a discussion item that you, basically, what you on the agenda, but we talked about it and, we'll get more information at the next meeting.
Well, we know, I mean, it ain't done preliminary work because we know that you gotta go in that direction, whether you go legislatively or you go interlocal agreement. This has to change at some point. So they're already doing preliminary work that would probably work for either way.
Right.
And I mean, for this to go forward, they would have to come up with a document that this board would all have to approve and then would have to recommend to the two elected official bodies. So, you know, you're in the beginning phases of this, but I mean, they said they've got 19 pages of stuff already done, but they've done that because ultimately, however you solve this, it's not gonna stay in this form forever. It's gonna have to evolve into something else. So I think it's good they're moving forward.
Here's what I'm hearing. Either we're gonna do it as an interlocal agreement, or we're gonna do it as a legislative. Right. So that's what we have to decide.
So if we do an interlocal agreement, the governor don't need to sign off.
Correct.
Right.
But it would help us if the governor.
If you do it legislative, basically what it does is just adds stability to it.
I think we've got time to research both options, maybe to the point of talking to people who directly, who, you know, done both options. I mean, this is a very preliminary discussion right now, so.
Right. But, like Commissioner Wood says, ultimately, we're gonna have to decide what we're gonna do.
We only have 7 members yet, so I mean, like Commissioner Wood said, it's very preliminary.
Got 3 floors.
But if we're gonna do it this legislative cycle, we have to have it done by January, and this is August already, right? And everybody knows.
That was me, my motion.
That moves, government stuff moves kind of slow.
Y'all snail.
You might be ready by next August.
We might be ready by next January.
But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up today, because it has been in discussion. Go ahead, Dave.
Speaking of the last member of the committee, we are out of applicants we can re-advertise, or if this committee knows people who want to appoint for that last member. What you decided previously was once 6 of you form the committee, 6 of you would then pick the 7th member.
Yeah, right. So I think everybody should present any proposals they have, and, anybody y'all know interested? I have a couple of people I'm going to call this week about it. I'm going to wait till after this meeting, see if anybody brought any money or had any money. But I have a couple of people that might be interested in it that I've talked to. And if y'all have any money, whatever.
I'll talk to a couple here. I get it about 10 minutes into it. Introduce me.
I think Stu said he wanted to.
Yeah, it's Stu. Put an application in, we'll vote on it.
You been here.
There are a couple people out there I know that might be interested.
Pardon me?
There are a couple people out there I know that might be interested. Verify.
What area is underrepresented?
What area?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know, really, we got somebody from Fort White, that's somebody from the county, you know, so.
Well,
Just
south
kind
in
of
the
that
county,
large,
so
that
have
large.
you got anybody in the Ellisville, you know, somebody that's gonna be affected by these decisions?
I don't have anyone else.
I can reach out to the people who might, but Toby, what about, Wayne? He might. He's down in Ellisville. Yeah.
That's a good point.
I think he'd be a good one to go.
Well, like I say, anybody knows anybody, we're trying to get somebody, get some candidates at the next meeting that we can look at. Try to find somebody we think probably would be the best qualified. Qualified candidate.
If you find somebody you want us to put together bios on each one, just have them call me and we'll put together a short bio so you guys all know who they are and know what their background is.
Do we know anybody? Do we know anybody in the community that's worked in wastewater utilities in the past? Stacy, do you know anybody in the county?
I do, just, I know a few.
Got experience in wastewater?
Yes, sir.
Because I mean, the more qualified they are, knowledgeable they are too, what, you know, I think that would be the best.
We do have some people we can reach out to.
Yeah, I'll reach out to them.
That's good. Any other discussion? Anybody got anything else they want to add?
Is there any way we can start getting these agendas before the morning of?
You don't have any, you didn't get an email with the agenda?
No.
Did they have your email address?
So, A, Kingfisher, by the bird, #1 @gmail.com.
They are published 7 days in advance, we apologize.
It's on the county website. We could go there.
But you should be getting an email.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it should be emailed out to you.
Yeah.
We publish them 7 days.
We'll make sure you get an email. I apologize, I thought you were getting email.
No.
Yeah, Ronnie, you got emails, you get email, your David get email too, but I know I get email, so you get email.
We'll find out for some reason why you didn't get it. Make sure you know.
We'll get you on email list for sure, you know. All right. Any further discussion, we'll adjourn.
And we do broadcast in Fort White. Watch out.
Okay.